Hello and welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. I'm Will.
And I'm James. And yeah, it's getting very close to one of our biggest events of the year. Will have to say, I'm not quite sure what day it is with all the running around that's going into pulling Pint of Origin together, but more of that later because we've got some pretty exciting news to talk about that broke just at the end of last week.
Yeah, of course. Two Bays Brewing won their second gold medal at the World Beer Cup. So two in a row, which is comfortably a first for any Australian brewery. Two gold medals in a row, that is. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very rare thing when we're talking about any breweries, really. It's sort of, you'd probably say it's one of the highest honours in the beer world.
Well, I mean, eight and a half thousand entries, which is what sort of three and a half times what they'd get for the Australian International Beer Awards, which are taking place this month. Um, and I think the thing that really sort of highlights just how amazing it is to get that award is, as you covered in your article, there isn't just like a number of gold, silvers, or bronzes in each category. There's just the one gold, silver, and bronze. And I think in the past, whenever any Australian has got a bronze or a silver, it's been worthy of a story. Like Buckety's had a bronze and silver a couple of years running. Stonewood Pacific Ale got bronze a while ago. James Squires picked up a couple of medals over the year, but to get a gold means you are like the best in the world in your category in the biggest competition in the world. To do it 2 years running, and with a mid strength last year and then a 4% Pacific Ale, the very first batch they brewed of that beer as well. I can imagine there's a lot of gluten free brewers in the States who've got a lot more, years under their belt, must be looking at it going, what is the secret sauce of this tiny Australian brewery?
Well, as Richard Jeffers likes to say, it's a very close knit and tight community. He said, I spoke to him, he was in WA actually, so it was quite early in the morning for him. And he said he'd already gotten a lot of texts from his fellow gluten free brewers congratulating him and the team for what they'd pulled off.
Yeah, I saw some responses from American brewers. I think there's one from Alaska put a comment on congratulating them on our article when we got it up on socials last Friday, which is pretty cool. And I know that there were some pretty interesting comments from local brewers and judges who know what they're doing. John Selton, who's the head brewer at Brick Lane, was said amazing achievement. Once was great, twice is legendary. And Tina
Three time his
Panoutzis,
goat status.
say again.
Three times his goat status.
Yeah, well, let's not push them too hard. Let them enjoy the glory for a little while yet. And then Tina Panoutzis, who many people in and around the beer industry will know, sort of head of sensory at CEB for a long time, one of the most respected beer judges in the world. Congratulations to you all! What an incredible achievement of your craftsmanship. I think the whole audience heard me cheer. I think she also tried to sort of keep hold of the banner, or there was a bit of a scribble over who was going to keep the gold medal banner to bring home.
Yeah, it was a funny story to find out about. I was out for a morning walk, and Christian from Two Bays actually messaged me, and it was a picture of Lindsay from Stomping Ground, former podcast guest, and also Glenn Harrison from Ellerslie Hops. And I was like, it's interesting that they've won an award somehow. So I think this might be Two Bays that have won another gold medal. So yeah, it's a really. I've been over to the competition when the awards announced, and when Buckety's won a medal actually, and it's a really nice vibe when all the Australians are sort of in there rooting for their country and things like that. It's a quite a different sort of experience to our local awards, I think, because of the very global nature of it.
Yeah, and I guess, and speaking of our local awards, maybe just a little pitch for next week's show. We're actually going to put next week's show out on Friday, all being well. And the idea is that we'll do some recording straight after the awards finish next Thursday night. Me and you will sit down and reflect on what's happened, and we should be able to push out next week's episode, which will feature a bit of behind the scenes stuff at this year's judging next Friday instead. Nothing like putting a bit of pressure on yourselves on the tail end of Pint of Origin Festival week, but we just figure it's a nice thing to try the next sort of step up in what we've been doing with the podcast since July last year.
Yeah, so if you don't see the episode on Thursday morning, you know it's not because something's gone wrong, and we'll try and get it out as early as we can on Friday. It might not be the sort of 6 a.m. thing that you're used to as listeners. I know everyone wakes up psyched to listen to the podcast. It might be slightly later in the day on Friday, but we'll get it out basically as
Yeah.
quickly as we can. We think it's worthwhile to hold it just because of the what will be breaking news.
Yes, and it probably helps that Matt, our producer, is in the States with his family, so he'll be on a completely different time scale and should be able to pick it up from us as soon as we send it over from the showgrounds. Um, I guess one thing I wanted to say about Two Bays as well. Actually, I was running a fair at the school, local primary school, running a bar, I should say, at the local primary school fair last week. and put some two bays on. And there was a few celiac parents there. We ended up having to go back to the local bottle store to get a couple more cases of two bays because people knew it, and they sort of they knew the beer, loved the beer, and actually knew the story as well. Some of them had met Richard and Christian at fairs and been to the brewery, so that was pretty cool as well. I guess they are sort of known if you give again if you really care about decent beer and you are celiac or gluten intolerant, there does seem to be really good awareness and sort of cut through within that community as well, which was kind of encouraging to see. I guess it's all very well for them winning awards in the States, but I'm sure they'd be much happier to know there's people out there who are actively hunting down their beer and really appreciate it as well. Um, but yeah, I mentioned Pint of Origin there. I guess that's been sort of fairly all-consuming for certainly for me over the last few weeks. But we're almost at the point where there's not much more we can do now. So that kicks off Friday. I think despite the challenges we've had, with one brewery, one venue in liquidation when we launched the program, another one still in administration, one venue unable to get their logistics. It's a very, I guess, beer industry in 2025 sort of lead up to the festival. But we've once again we've got a pretty amazing lineup, loads of really good stuff taking place, and I think there's been some real good interest online. So if you haven't checked it out yet, jump online at pintoforigin.com. You can download your digital passport there if you're going to hit the streets. There's bonuses for the more venues you visit. There's prizes and stuff like that, and just some really cool events. Beer and skittles, beer cocktails. It was nice that we were able to play a small role, Will, in bringing together a collaboration between Alice Springs Brewing and Kaiju for the Northern Territory venue, and then to get to name the beer yesterday. And be involved in the concept for the for the decal, which I think we'll wait for people to discover it on tap at Farside Beers. But I think the concept for the decal sort of rides that fine line between amazing and potentially slightly inappropriate. So we'll see what people make of that when they head out to that venue.
Yeah, and it's even one of my beer styles, and we that was the one thing we didn't have a say in what beer style it would be. And it's one of my favorites, so we'll leave that as a surprise as well, though.
Exactly. So yeah, so that'll kicks off Friday. In other news this week, Will, you spoke to. Oh, it's also tying together. Actually, you spoke to Nick McDonald, who has his brewery Bucketees has won a couple of World Beer Cup medals in the past, and they've had a really big few weeks actually.
Yeah, I actually I spoke to Nick. I think it was on Thursday, and there was part of me because the awards came out on Friday morning. I was like, got to keep a close eye on this because they have had World Beer Cup success in the past. I don't even know if they sent beer this year, but I was like, this might turn into a very different story if they end up also getting a medal. But yeah, Chalkies, it's a pool hall. It's a couple of minute walk from their brewery in Brookvale. Pool hall, karaoke room. Uh, they call it a super duper screen. It looks more like 3 or 4 TV screens, so a massive sports bar as well. I think this nicely ties into what a lot of breweries and other beer businesses are doing, where they're looking for very experience led venues. I mean, Hawks Brewing in Sydney has always been that. In the beer world, though, you think back to like Scratch when they opened Netherworld with their arcade machines, or it's just having something to focus on that's quite different from a brewery tap room experience, and as Nick says, to complement what you're doing rather than directly compete with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so. It just shows ways that I guess breweries are diversifying. We've talked about live music and all manner of different ways that breweries are looking to diversify. I guess expand what they offer, and just try and bring more people in. And in some cases, I guess replace stuff that might have been lost elsewhere in society as well.
Well, it's pretty
On a
hard to get taps at the moment, so if you can
Yes.
build your own if you can build your own beer taps, that also helps.
Yes, yes. Yes, and hopefully that'll change at some point soon as well. Yeah, another piece you put out, a bit more industry focused this week as well, was you had a chat with OJ, the new, recently sort of elevated to top dog at HPA.
Yeah, HBA CEO. I didn't actually realize it was his first day when I spoke to him on Monday. Obviously, he's been with the business for a very long time, and it's been a steady handover with Tim Lord announcing his retirement last year and then stepping back properly last week. But yeah, first of all, we focused on the crop report. They've looked to grow less hops, but have, thanks to Mother Nature, have actually had a very successful year in terms of hop growing, which is a good thing apparently. But and they've also opened their Myrtleford hop processing plant, Hop Central, they're calling it, and I'm really keen to check it out at one point because it looks very state of the art. I'm sure I'll be up there for next harvest to see all the bells and whistles that they've got.
Yeah, for sure. And on that front, kicking off next week, unless any delays come along in the meantime, we'll have a bit of an offshoot podcast series that we've been working on for a while. So with HPA, well, actually Craig, Craig Williams, who's sometimes co-host on these shows. He's been chatting to various brewers around the world and also experts from the team at HPA. And it's a 6-part series looking at sort of HPA's 6 key hop varieties, with brewers who love them, use them particularly well. So that'll be kicking off as a sort of shorter mini, just purely hop focused series starting on Tuesdays from next week, all being well. So keep an eye out for that.
Fantastic. And then on to this week's guest, Steph Howard.
Yes, Steph will be someone who's known to many people in the beer industry. She joined Cryer Malt pretty much straight from uni without even being a beer drinker, and has now left the industry after 10 years to go and work in dairy in New Zealand, and is still far younger than even you, Will, despite having had this stellar career that's taken her through the ranks at Cryer Malt and Barrett Burston, as that sort of business has sort of become part of other bigger grain companies. But yeah, she's one of the most sort of best known faces around the industry, sort of came in right at the time when things were really exploding into life for craft beer. So I guess even sort of the bigger malts have evolved and changed over that time as well. Was involved in a lot of the marketing stuff there, supporting a lot of events. I know, I would have first met her when I was still running Good Beer Week with, a few other people, and she was sort of Cryer were huge supporters of the festival, as they were a number of other major events and sort of initiatives around the industry. So it was, I guess, almost a bit different to a lot of our podcast chats. Yes, there was some insight into what she'd brought to the role, but mainly it was a chance for Steph, as she sort of, as we said, it was a bit of a sort of this is your life kind of episode, just, having a chat to Steph about how she got involved, her career, highlights, the people that really sort of mentored her and the people that had just, really inspired her throughout her 10 years in beer.
Yeah, it'll be a shame that she's moving on. I think I'll definitely personally miss Steph, but it was a really good conversation. So we hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, make sure you like, subscribe, and review. Cheers.
Cheers.
Pint of Origin returns on May the 9th, bigger and better than ever.
23 great Melbourne venues will be pouring beers and more from across the globe.
Head to pintoforigin.com for the full lineup and to grab your free festival passport.
So get ready to travel the world of beer.
And enjoy a beer festival like no other.
It all starts tomorrow and runs until May 18th.
Cheers.
Steph, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we've got you here because you have some big news to share. Tell us about what's next for Steph.
I do. So after 10 incredible years, I have decided to leave the industry. It is bittersweet completely, but I am going home to New Zealand and I have an opportunity to do so. So for me, that's my next step.
Yeah, no, I think it was obviously big news that took a few people by surprise. I think, you sent me a message, gave me a call from Japan. You were at the time on a work trip, but I think maybe a drinking trip as well. For what you were saying about, I think some of the conversations you had on the night you first put the announcement out, but I certainly got a few messages from people around the beer industry going, have you heard this? You need to do something about Steph, or not about, something on Steph moving on. So it must have been something that, there's a fair bit of time and thought went into it, I'm assuming, or did it all happen quite quickly?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of when the opportunity arose in New Zealand for me to be able to move back, it did move really quickly from there. When I actually handed in my notice, I think it was, I want to say it was probably less than a week before I went to Japan for the Beer Expo conference up there. And then throughout that, we had to start notifying, especially my team first, and then I wanted to kind of call a couple of, key people that have been influential in my life throughout the industry, knowing that I think it was the weekend before Gabs maybe, and I kind of knew that if it was going to get out to anyone, it was definitely going to circulate Gabs at the time, and I think it did circulate Gabs a little bit because I got some messages from some people. But then, Yeah, I was actually in Japan with Selena, of all people, because she was there with Fermentus. And we were having dinner one night, and we got talking, and I think she mentioned you instantly, and said, "Well, if you don't call him tomorrow, I am." So yeah, the next day I picked up the phone, and I'd heard that other people had already reached out to you.
Oh yeah, I got a message from Will Irving, so ex-Feral Head brewer, now one of the team at Found, and he was like, just heard about this, you need to do a story on Steph. I'm like, don't worry, it's all in hand. But I guess, and we just figured, we'd written about you a couple of times, in the past. It's like, well, let's do, as I said in the email earlier today, it's like, this is your life for the beer industry. We should have one of those big red books to sort of give you at the end with all the.
And we've got all these guests that are actually going to come in as well. So this is going to be quite a podcast.
Yeah, they'll be waiting outside going, just sort your technical issues out, James. Will you? You've been waiting for ages. Yeah, and so it's been was it something you were sort of looking for, an opportunity to move back? And like, it's from what you said to us, it's sort of personal reasons as much as anything.
Yeah, it's definitely been on my mind. My partner and I, we've done long distance for the last 2 years now. My brother is literally about to have a baby, and when this goes live, he's hopefully his wife has had the baby by then, which will be very exciting. So I'm about to be an auntie.
Yeah.
And for me, March, I hit my 10 years with Barrett's and Cryer, and for me it was really that point that I needed to evaluate what was next. And I want to think about things like family and stuff too. And it's quite hard to do that long distance.
Mm-hmm.
So I was keeping my options open, and an opportunity in New Zealand came to light, and it kind of fell into place quite perfectly, and it was kind of silly not to take it.
Yeah, it must be such a difficult decision as well, though, because your entire working life really has been in the beer industry, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah.
Like, I started at this job literally a month after my 21st birthday.
Mm-hmm.
It was, straight out of uni. I had part-time jobs throughout that time, but nothing like this. And it's been a wild ride. The last 10 years has been wild. Who would have thought, we would have gone through a pandemic as well as that same year. We had those wildfires, which caused a bit of havoc across Australia. And it's, for the 4 or 5 years before that, we went through, what I probably would call the craft beer boom. Like, we just had massive growth in craft beer, massive changes, events like Good Beer Week and BrewCon became bigger than they probably ever had, and there was just incredible things happening in the industry, and it was vibrant, and it was very full on. Yeah. I think, during that event season, which was almost May to like August, there was something on every weekend. And I think in this industry, a lot of the people that were on that industry circuit became like family, because I think you almost spent more time with them than you did with your own friends and family, because you were with them every weekend at a different event, a different conference, and it was just, they became so important.
Love to hear how you actually sort of got that first job then. I know with one of David Cryer's former employees, like Tom Adams, it was a very sort of early in the career, just arrived, not long in New Zealand, working in the garage kind of thing. Like, was there a similar sort of organic sort of coming together of you and the Cryer team back then? Yeah,
absolutely. I think at the time I was exploring my options, and I was seeing what was next for me. And it was simply as something as, I think I applied for a whole bunch of jobs on Seek. Mm-hmm. David's wife called me back. I went in for an interview. I actually didn't even meet David when I interviewed. I only met with Claire. I think I got a second interview, and that's when I met David. It was March time, so I want to think where he could have been. I think he was on some sort of sales trip with Tom at the time. There was probably about 7 to 10 people, I would say, working at Cryer in New Zealand at the time. We were fully run out of New Zealand completely. And I got offered the job. Of all things, I actually first started out in finance.
What was your career? What was your degree, or your sort of training before that point?
So I went to university for like marketing and accounting.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think my job was accounts payable.
Mhm.
I think I was in that role for maybe 3 months. And yeah, it must have been 3 months, because then I had David calling me from Melbourne being like, this lady, Kate Patterson, is going to reach out to you. She needs you to do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm at Good Beer Week right now. And it was, I think from there I started, moving into marketing. And then about 3 months later, took over marketing for Cryer and moved into that role.
Just why you weren't doing accounts payable in the last 2 or 3 years, otherwise you never would have survived the 3 months, let alone 10 years.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of crazy how it fell into this spot. My first event I went to was the Beer Awards in Sydney. When
Indies?
Yeah, but it was
when it was the CBIA.
CBIA, So it was the CBIA Awards in Sydney. There was like some events happening. There was like almost a Sydney Craft Beer Week, I think. No, it was Sydney Craft Beer Week. Was happening around it at the time. I went with David. Tom was there too, obviously, and I went with David, and that's when I met Pirate Life. That's when I met Kegstar, well, the team from Kegstar that moved into Convoy, and Joe Cook and Sam Maitland. And then trying to think who else. There was a lot of people there. A lot of people.
But it was a very quick sort of like straight into the heart of and I guess moving into a role that you wanted to do as well, because Cryer, as a business, was always very involved, I guess, on that sort of support of major events and awards and that kind of thing. So it would have been a great opportunity, I guess, for you. Like David, I think, always wanted to get involved in support, but marketing maybe wasn't his thing. So he would have been like, here you go.
Yeah, I think the probably the organization and the planning around marketing and events and activities was my specialty.
Okay.
And definitely something that probably needed to happen. I still remember that first Good Beer Week where Kate was ringing me about banners and everything else. And to be honest, I had absolutely no idea what Good Beer Week even was.
And but you know how to get banners.
And then suddenly he was telling me to ring Kate about stuff to do with AIBA, but I didn't realize they were two separate events. And I think I was getting Kate confused, and it was mayhem. But to be honest, it was awesome.
And was that the time when there was the full, like the Cryer Suite upstairs at Beer Deluxe as well? Was that already up and running with the whole week of events that Cryer was sponsoring? Because we used to host panels there, and there was all manner of stuff going on at that time.
I don't know if it was that first year, because
you made it happen.
I think that first year there was like some small conference associated with Good Beer Week. Maybe the CBIA had also a conference happening, I think, from what I remember. Definitely the next year, we had the Cryer Trade Hub, and that's kind of, we built that with Kate and Chev, and really made that into something awesome over those years.
You definitely had banners in place by the end of that. There was whole walls of Cryer stuff, I seem to recall.
Yes, there definitely was. I think if there was, you guys both know Kate Patterson. If there was an opportunity to brand something, she would propose it to you. That's for sure.
Yeah. And so what was it like there, sort of coming in from, so fresh from uni, and then within a few months suddenly being thrown into this industry that at the time would have been in the peak of its sort of rapid growth, and I guess from being a perspective, you would have been out working for a supplier as well. It would have been touch points would have been with the awards, with festivals, with events, with other suppliers, with brewers everywhere. It would have been a lot to put together, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it was daunting, like absolutely daunting. I think I had no idea what I was in for at the start. I think also it was quite funny, just even my height in proportion to David's rocking up.
Just for context, so Dave is what, 6'5"?
Yeah, probably, easily. Yes.
Man mountain.
For those that don't know me, I'm not exactly the tallest person out there. But I did always say, I think I remember someone once asked me what it was like, or how did you get to know so many people that you did in the industry? And all I said is, you've just got to do one event with David, and trust me, by the end of it, you know everyone. Like, he was probably exceptional. Well, he is exceptional at just introducing you to absolutely everyone.
Yeah. Well, and everyone loves and respects the guy, so it probably makes it easier. So, he's like the perfect calling card to meet somebody. And you're still in touch. Well, obviously, it's been a few years since David stepped back. It's still in touch on a personal level. Is he still sort of paying attention on the business level as well, or has he sort of managed to extract himself into his dungeon of comic books?
Well, last I'd heard, he apparently had a comic book shop in Auckland.
Oh, wow.
We've touched base a few times, but he's definitely kind of, I think, separated himself a little bit from the industry.
Were you surprised by how big and consuming the craft beer world was? Like what were your sort of thoughts on what beer was, I guess, going into it as a uni student?
I guess I was very naive. You know, when I started, I'll be honest, I didn't even drink beer.
Mhm.
It's, you know, I played into that classic stereotype that, you know, a young woman doesn't drink beer sort of thing. And I think very quickly I learned to love beer, just to be able to explore all the different beer styles, and also like, I feel like there's so much more than just drinking a beer. It's about, you know, the environment and the culture and sharing it with friends. And that's, like I said, when you spend so much time with these people in the industry, they do become really genuine friends of yours. And being able to, you know, sit down over a beer that they have produced and, you know, put their heart and soul into, and also be able to share that experience with people that you care about is really awesome.
And I guess from your perspective as well, knowing that certain products that you've been responsible for bringing to market have also gone into, you know, creating the flavour, the texture, you know, of that beer as well. And I guess then at the same, even beyond that, at some of the events, you know, you touched upon as well, when you go to something like that really celebrates the story of the brewers and the food pairing, all that kind of stuff as well, would have been pretty cool for someone who was just like, I'm getting into this malt business, we'll see what malt's all about. Next thing you know, there's this whole world of flavour and experience opened up to you.
Absolutely. And I think as well as my career has progressed, you know, I've had the opportunity of going to things like Hop Harvest. I've been able to spend a lot of time with our farmers that grow for Barrett Burston and, you know, develop barley varieties suited for certain markets and distilling and stuff like that. And it's been really, really cool to, you know, further understand that side of it, because, you know, us as suppliers are very passionate, you know, speaking on behalf of our maltsters and our team at Barrett Burston, we are very passionate about the product that we produce. But, you know, if it doesn't go right on the farm, we can't, you know, make that product.
Yeah.
So it's really, you know, you need that entire supply chain. And, you know, for a lot of the farmers, this is their entire livelihood. You know, they need us to continue producing malt for them to continue growing malted barley.
And I was just thinking as well, I guess one of the things happened over your time in the malt industry, there's been a number of ownership changes with, you know, with Cryer and the business you've worked for, I guess, you know, and becoming part of, I guess, bigger malt industry than some of the sort of local ones that are growing up in Australia. But at the same time, I guess you'll have seen those businesses react and evolve with the changing beer market as well. And I guess you'll have been involved in helping bring some of those products to market as, like, sort of, I guess, businesses that might be based upon bringing base malt or sort of, you know, a smaller number of large volumes to the market have now gone, oh, this is a different market now. We have to evolve. I guess that would have been a pretty interesting part of your time as well.
Absolutely. So now we are owned by Souffle Malt. So we are the largest malting company in the world currently. And with that, you know, we have this massive agronomy department. You know, we have people within our team globally that are developing barley varieties suited for different regions. We're operating across 20 countries. You know, barley is very much like, you know, grapes for wine. It doesn't grow everywhere. It's very in the elements of the weather, and you need to make sure that you're producing varieties that, one, yields well for the farmers, but also produces a consistent crop. So yeah, we have gone through a few ownership changes, but it's really, what I think is really awesome with these larger companies is just the resources that they put into some of those areas that you don't necessarily have with with the smaller companies, around developing barley varieties. Having a team as well globally that's so focused on sustainability. Like, we've got some really aggressive 2030 sustainability targets, and we're well on our way to hit that by 2030 as well, through things like, biomass, AI. At our facility in Geelong, we've got a wastewater treatment plant. So like 50% of our water that we use is fully recycled. Australia is a very dry planet. Water is a very, very precious resource. And, you have to be looking at ways everywhere to look after your resources.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you ever think, 7 or 8 of you in this warehouse and office space in New Zealand, like, were there moments where you realized how much you were growing and the business was growing and you were growing with it? I imagine you never thought you'd end up you seem to constantly be in Southeast Asia and in Japan. Like, did you ever think it could possibly lead that way, or do you ever sort of pinch yourself?
And sometimes you're in those countries for work as well.
I don't think until I stepped really into the sales director role at Barrett's that I truly understood, I guess, the scale of our operations, but also the scale of some of the operations in Southeast Asia. Some of these breweries up there are massive, and they are also producing, great beer in very difficult climates, very difficult environments too. And they rely so heavily on the global malt market because of those reasons. And I think for me, something that has really transpired over my last couple of years, working with a lot of major breweries across Asia and still working with Australia and New Zealand breweries, is that no matter what the size, what the scale, they're still just as passionate. And they're the most incredible people, that it's all built on relationships. Everyone is so lovely, so supportive. All they want to do is collaborate and build partnerships. And it's really awesome to see.
We'll take a break, Sean. I'd love to come back and talk about some of those people you've met over the years that been important to you and some of the great experiences you've had. Before that, though, you have come a long way, in a short period of time. A number of promotions and job changes over the years. Still very young age, especially for someone compared to someone like me. I mean, do you have any idea what it is you sort of brought to the game? You think that really has helped you get where you have done, so quickly?
I don't know. That's a hard thing. Really hard thing to think about. I guess, gosh, I really don't know. If you spoke to some people like Will, that I have a really good friendship with, he would probably say I'm a pain in the ass. But
I was going to say surely it'd be enthusiasm or something like that, but maybe that's enthusiasm viewed through a different prism.
Yeah, probably. But no, I think, I don't know, I probably don't give myself enough praise sometimes, and I personally find it really difficult to probably speak about myself a little bit. But if I was to say anything, I would probably say it's my passion. I've been very passionate across the last 10 years, and I've given up a lot as well, moving countries right before COVID hit and being stuck here on my own for a long time. Melbourne wasn't the best place to be stuck in. But I would, at the end of the day, I think what's gotten me through and has got to be passion and just my love for the job and love for the industry.
And your passion is being transferred to a different industry. You want to, before we cut to the break, do you want to tell us about what lies ahead for you once you reach New Zealand?
Yes. So I'm moving into the dairy industry. So specifically in butter and cheese.
Both delicious products.
Very much so.
As delicious as beer, I would argue.
So obviously in New Zealand, one of the leading industries is the dairy industry, and trying I guess it's quite hard not to work for a dairy company in New Zealand. My brother and my sister-in-law both work for Fonterra. I never thought we would be a family that works in the dairy industry, but it's certainly going that way. So we'll see. But no, it's a massive change for me. I know very little about that industry and that market, but luckily I was able to show that I've got some transferable skills and I was offered the role. So yeah.
I can't wait until in a year's time we catch up and you can just tell me everything there is to know about cheese. But before then, let's take a break. Cheers.
Hey brewers, how much time do you spend thinking about flooring? If the answer is even a moment, it's too much. Solve your flooring issues for good with a hard-wearing, hygienic and safe epoxy floor coating from Roxette. For busy brewery environments, an epoxy coating is the perfect solution. Slip-resistant surfaces help avoid injuries due to spills or liquid escapes, making the brew deck a safer place for staff, suppliers and visitors. Epoxy is also super long-lasting and is renowned for its durability and resistance to heavy foot traffic, impacts and chemical spills. With proper installation and maintenance, epoxy flooring can last for many years, reducing the need for frequent replacements and associated costs, which often results in valuable downtime. It can also provide great aesthetic appeal, as you can add colours to match your unique branding or blend different blocks of colour to suit your brewery theme and vibe. Importantly, epoxy floors are easy to keep clean. It's non-porous and the seamless, smooth surface doesn't harbour bacteria, the enemy of brewing great beer. A well-installed epoxy floor makes end-of-day cleaning a breeze, saving time and money in the process. Your brewery floor shouldn't be causing you headaches when you want to focus on making your amazing beer. Talk to the team at Roxette about an epoxy solution. Visit roxette.com.au, that's roxset.com.au today.
Okay, welcome back. Steph, now we touched upon it a little bit in the first half of the chat. I guess over the last decade, you sort of forged relationships and friendships with a lot of people throughout the beer industry and the industries that surround it. So not just here, but overseas as well. I know you've mentioned some of those that sort of become good friends and sort of inspired you. I mean, are there people that, as this is this is your life reflection, some people that have really helped you along the career, or that really sort of stood out, as guess good beer citizens, or people that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, to be honest, the list is massive. If I was to pick a couple in particular that were very, very special and very close to my heart, probably one of them is Sam Fuss.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's ever worked with her or come across with her, just, the time that she has for people, the laughters, the joking around. I've been very fortunate that since moving into my director role, I have been able to see her a few times at Brew Asia in Vietnam and Singapore, and been able to, still continue to share memories and share good times together. But no, she's definitely, through her time with Young Henrys and then on to Filter and doing what she did with those filter beers, and then moving up to Bali with the brewery up there. It's been awesome, and she's really good.
And as a sort of sounding board, or just someone who's just, encouraged you along the way?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
I think she's always been one of my biggest supporters. She's just been incredible. She's always up for a good laugh, but she's just been a really genuine friend, and been there personally as well when I've needed her over the years, which it's been really awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Yeah.
I think I've got a few memories of Sam that even from 15 years ago that have burned so intensely on the brain, because when she gets going, it's like she really gets going, and leaves an impression.
Oh, and she is a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
She really is. There's a lot of memories I certainly am not allowed to speak about.
Oh yeah, I was just going, no, can't mention that one.
Yeah, no, if I was trying to give any sort of example, I don't think anything's appropriate.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. And then I probably couldn't go past Tiff.
Yeah.
Tiffany Waldron. I know, she has just been exceptional. She especially, becoming Australia's president of Pink Boots, and the work she did there and the way she built it up as well. It was incredible. I think also just the time and support that she's put into the industry for, I guess, areas outside of her day-to-day job has been amazing.
Yeah.
And then it's really hard to nail down some other people. There's probably so many others that after this I'll kick myself that I didn't mention, but
you can edit them in and just run a list of names over the screen or something like that.
Yeah, you must do a credit list at the
end. Like Jack, Red, and MC, they were actually probably some of the first industry people I ever met in 2015. They just launched Pirate Life. They had a tap takeover in Sydney. I went along to it not having any idea, but they really took me under their wing and really made me feel at home and comfortable in an industry at that time where women were very far and in between, and it was daunting being a 21-year-old walking into some of these rooms, not knowing a single person.
Yeah.
So they were awesome in that regard, and they built Pirate Life to be the awesome brewery that it is.
Yeah.
I can't go past mentioning, Will Irving, Scotty Hargrave, Jane Lewis, Josh Thomas from Beer Farm. All of them have just been really, really exceptional friends over the years. Tim from Hop Nation, he's become a really close buddy of mine personally as well, not only professionally, but yeah, a lot of them I will certainly miss having day-to-day interactions with.
The man that designed arguably your favourite Australian beer of the last 10 years there, Tim.
Yeah, well, one of Steph's as well, Rattenhand.
Yeah.
That's why we become mates, right?
No, exactly. The only reason we're friends, really, isn't it?
It's a common bond over a Julie.
Yeah.
That's all right. Those are all a list of names of people who are, I'm sure, chomping at the bit to brew beers in New Zealand, so I'm sure you'll have a chance to catch up and see them whenever they're over.
Hopefully.
You mentioned Pink Boots there, and also, I guess being one of very few women in the industry when you joined. Have you, I guess, what was it like sort of being part of Pink Boots, and how do you see that sort of the society's role within the beer industry? And have you felt that sort of things have changed for women in the industry over the 10 years you've been involved as well?
Yeah, definitely. So, I was very fortunate that through our partnership with Yakima Chief Hops, we run the Pink Boots blend every year and bring that Pink Boots blend. During COVID, we really did have to adapt. And this opportunity came up where we could actually run a virtual selection process in Australia. So for those that don't know how the selection process usually works, is it usually works at Great American Beer Festival, and they run the selection process, they pick the varieties that feature in the blend, and then the blend is produced and released the following year to be beers brewed around International Women's Day. And then dollar amount per kilo is donated back to the Pink Boots Society. Now, something that was really, when this blend was launched, something that we really wanted to do was, at the time, the Australian Pink Boots Society was operating independently to the global chapters. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that the profit from the blend that was being sold in Australia was going to Australia. We didn't want to go back to the US and it be, caught up and not go back to the Australian organization. So that was something that we got done, and it was really awesome to really be able to give them that direct financial contribution through what we had sold in Australia. And then obviously when COVID hit, we had the opportunity of doing a selection process in Australia. It was virtual. We had to deal. It was difficult at times. We had to run essentially we had each of the state chapters, depending on what the government requirements were in the region at the time,
it's always changing as well,
running their own selection process. And we sent the varieties out, and then I think Tiff and I jumped on a call and ran a blind selection process to come out with this blend, and then submit this blend into the US to go into the final selection. So we did that for a couple of years, and it was really cool that even throughout, what went on, we were able to adapt and really include a lot more people globally throughout that selection process.
Yeah, my understanding is Pink Boots Australia is one of the more significant chapters, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there any reason, do you think that why that is? Is it because of some of those passionate leaders? You keep saying Tiff, but I think we need to include you in that as well, in your involvement over the years.
But also, I think, hands down, it goes down to, Jane Lewis, Sam Fuss, Tina, Kiralee. There's huge amounts of women behind Pink Boots that have contributed to build it up and make it what it is today. Absolutely. It's a very, very active chapter, very big chapter now as well. Even Ally McDonald, when she was at the helm, the passion behind what she did was incredible, and has, I think now as well, opening it up to all fermentation, it's been really awesome because it's given that different set of networking, especially for beer industry. It's now opened it up to, a whole different network that we necessarily haven't had, contact or interaction with, and really built that community wider.
Yeah, and I guess the networking side of it, as well as, providing scholarships and education and that kind of stuff, I guess that would have been really key, especially when it's still a very male-dominated industry. The thing I've noticed over the years that I guess highlights the growth is, when there's been the brew days, there might be one a year at the start, and then there'll be one in each state, and then just seeing the photos coming in, and then sometimes you've got these huge gatherings of people coming together to make these beer on this day, and you think, God, back then, the first Victorian women of beer brews, they'd have might drag together half a dozen people if they really she's sort of part owner of the business, bring her in, whatever, and then over the years it would just sort of grow and grow and just has become this huge network and big community.
Yeah, and now it's like at the point where you actually have to sign up for a ticket, and if you don't get a ticket, they may be full. You may not get your opportunity to attend this one, but there's always, plenty of opportunities. And I think even through, the mentor-mentee program, the pathway to judging, getting more women in judging positions throughout those competitions, they're just kind of two programs which I think have just been really beneficial.
And do you think you'll keep your sort of, trying to get invites coming to certain events like that once you're in the world of dairy?
I don't know. I don't know. I'll just need
Surely, are you going to miss the ABAs this year?
I am going to miss the ABAs.
Surely not in 2026 though.
You never know. We'll see what happens. I might make a reappearance just for shits and gigs eventually.
The World Cheese Cup.
Yeah.
And what about sort of that sort of people and Pink Boots in terms of you've been to so many great events, being supportive of being a supporter of or being involved in so many events. Have there been any standouts over the years where you just be like, this has just been an amazing thing to be involved in, or even just sort of personal highlights along the years, moments that have really imprinted themselves on your brain?
I think some personal highlights, especially, when we had those bushfires of 2019, 2020, Christmas, summer hit, we ran that the fire relief program, donating money through Barrett's pale malt they had sold, and we managed to raise $50,000 for the fire associations across Australia, and we split that across and donated it to each state fire association evenly, to try and provide some relief, try and do our little part that we could. That for me was, coming from New Zealand, bushfires on that sort of scale or what we deal with over here just never really crossed my mind. And it was very eye-awakening to what was going on and the impact it had, on everyone, even, thinking you're safe in the city, but, we were all joking about having to wear masks outside because of the air quality, and then fast forward 3 months later and we're wearing them compulsory anyway.
That was sort of the start. It was interesting, it's a reminder of just, I think, how positive beer industry has been in sort of, and I guess how on the front foot it's been in supporting so many causes over the years. Like you had that. We were involved with Beers for Bushfire Relief, and then helping drive that Resilience Beer project, which then sort of, I think by the time the beer came out, suddenly COVID was upon us, and there was this existential crisis, and it's never really sort of let up since. But I think it has been something. I think Cryer, on a sort of business level supporting industries, but I think the industry as a whole has been so sort of, if there is a cause out there that they've sort of pulled together and had that sort of awesome sort of supportive community vibe as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what is something that makes this industry so special, is the collaboration and the banding together when times are tough, and when something's going on. I think also it's amazing walking into a conversation or walking into a room and just hearing the sharing of knowledge and, sharing of advice. And it's even between, a major brewer and a smaller brewer, there's some secrets, but there's certainly a lot of collaboration and openness and willing to help and willing to assist. And I think that's really, really, I think it's something that makes the industry very special.
And what about the travel? Obviously, Will touched upon it before, and when we spoke last week, you're in Japan. I guess working in the industry has opened up the doors for all the travel. Has there been any place you've really enjoyed going, whether for awards or just for beer experience, or visiting producers in other countries that have really stood out?
Japan has to be very special to me. I have absolutely loved having the opportunity over the last couple of years going to visit Japan. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, I was there for Beer Expo Japan, and I was in a room with 400 craft brewers from across Japan that had come together for their kind of first ever, big national beer festival and conference. And it was really, really cool to see. It was a lot of collaboration. We sell a lot of malt up into that area, into craft, and it was really awesome to see a lot of, our malt being used through Japanese brewers in, Okinawa through to Naha, through to Osaka and Tokyo, everywhere. And it's just, it's very, very cool to see how far and wide, the malt that we produce here in Australia is traveled and used in.
Did it remind you of that, early CBIA kind of events and things like that, or was it different? Like how do you sort of look back at it now, someone who's been in craft beer in Australia and New Zealand for a decade?
Absolutely. Everyone there is either with their little esky jockey boxes, or those, very small little tap systems you see in a lot of places in Japan that are on there. Everyone's got 10-litre kegs. They don't really do kegs much bigger than that around those areas. But it was very, very close, very intimate. It was a really well-run event. And, yeah, it reminds me of the very early days, especially in Australia. I think the expo side maybe had like 20 people, 20 suppliers, maybe 30 suppliers. And it was, two small rooms, I say rooms widely, kind of set up within the expo space. But it was really cool. They've really been pushing to get something like this together for a few years. And it's run by, a group of essentially volunteers that all have their own craft breweries in Japan that are, putting their time together to make this happen. And it's really cool to see them actually finally be able to make it happen.
It's interesting to hear something that grassroots in Japan this late on in I guess in Australia's journey through craft beers. Essentially, I think back to the early years of craft beer here, or the rise of craft beer here and Crafty Pint and Good Beer Week, and the big Japanese beers coming over. Only a handful, but Hitachino Nest and a couple of others would be coming over. And we had the guy from Baird Beer came over and did a masterclass. And you kind of it's been there a while, but clearly, it's taken more time for it to sort of grow substantially and get to that point. And that's kind of, eye-opening and I guess almost reassuring in a way as well, that there's still these, growth markets out there, not too far from us that are exploring, craft beer in a way that we have been, and maybe slowed down a little bit at the minute. But yeah, it's cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another, back 2019, I had the opportunity to go to Brau in Germany. And, to see like what we saw at Beer Expo Japan 2 weeks ago, to go somewhere like Brau, which is just, you know,
A small city.
massive scales. You know, you
Yeah.
have one hall just for raw materials. You know, I think Crohn's has their own hall.
Wow.
You know, they
Yeah.
take up an entire hall themselves. To see some kind of a conference and event on a significantly larger scale on the opposite side, it was very, very eye-opening, but it was, a great learning opportunity.
Yeah. And sort of back to, I guess, the industry in Australia, we touched upon it already in terms of the supportive nature of the community, community nature of the industry, the sharing of information. And it might be a bit of a curly one, but do you see sort of, the Australian beer industry as having particular strengths that have shown over the years, or areas that you look at it and go, could still be better in this space?
Yeah, I think, the Australian industry right now is going through a bit of a tough time.
Mhm.
I think that's probably the best way to summarize it at the moment. I think though, from what I've seen throughout my 10 years here, is that no matter what we're going through, just the supportive nature of the industry, where, people either may be struggling or something has happened or they need a bit of help somewhere. There's always someone that's willing to help and willing to spend that time to assist.
What about personal or professional lessons you feel like you really picked up and want to take with you into this new industry?
Oh gosh. I think don't sweat the small stuff.
Mhm.
A really actually funny story, which I probably don't think too many people knew, is so back in my early days, Cryer Malt used to own Beervana, which for those that don't know, large beer festival happens in New Zealand. And about within my first year, we sold Beervana. But with that, we had some contractual obligations for the next couple of years. And an area that David really built up incredibly was the Portland Beer Exchange and the Portland bar that happened. So that was a beer exchange where a couple of brewers from New Zealand went across for Oregon Brewers Fest, and then we actually would bring a couple of brewers over for Beervana and bring their beer and do a whole bunch of events around it and collaborate in that sort of sense. Now, very early on, my job was bringing that beer across. And I think over the 3 years I did it, I don't think it ever went right.
Mhm.
Did the beer ever arrive? Or
It did eventually. So the first year, I remember the beer was on the container ship, but then the container ship caught fire.
oh my god!
Right.
So then we had to get the beer off, and a container then wasn't going to make it in time. So we had to end up air shipping half of the beer just to survive the festival and then send the rest of it later. But it was an absolute nightmare.
Mhm.
And then I think the second year, the brewer didn't get on the plane.
Mhm.
So the flight left without him. So we had booked these flights, and I remember it was like a Saturday morning, and I got a call to say he didn't make it on the plane.
Mhm.
So then suddenly we had all this beer and we had all these events, we had collaborations set up, and we had no brewer. That, I think, for me was a very, very memorable experience, and also just having to realize that things are never going to go right.
Mhm.
No matter how much you plan for it, no matter how much you want, you think about every single scenario.
Mhm.
Who's going to think the container ship's going to catch on fire and it's never actually going to leave?
It literally is a case of firefighting, in your
Yeah.
daily job then. Yeah.
But no, I think, my biggest lesson that I'm going to take with me to my new job is to not sweat the small stuff.
Mm-hmm. Focus on
Yeah.
the bigger picture.
Exactly.
And know that ships can catch on fire even
Yes.
though they're surrounded by water.
Exactly.
Hopefully farmers are more efficient when it comes to catching flights as well.
You gotta hope so. You gotta hope so.
Cool. And I will wrap up shortly, but I don't know if you've given too much thought to this. I'm assuming there'd be some sort of, leaving party farewells coming up. And I'd just love to know, after sort of 10 years in the industry, what, beer or beers will be on the, on the ride of the wish list or in your hand when you say farewell to the beer industry.
Or are you throwing out any luggage so you can take a couple of 4-packs back with you?
So, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, Radahund is a very favourite beer of mine. But I think for me, my go-to consistently beer is got to be a Balter XPA.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I visited that brewery. It was the Craft Brewers Conference that it was in Brisbane, and I think it was probably 2016. It was Balter had just opened, you know, they were just in that front small warehouse. That was all it was. And just being able to watch them grow, you know, be able to support them over the years. Obviously, you know, what Scotty and Stirls and the team did there has just been absolutely incredible. I have a lot of respect for them as people, and the company that they built and then on sold to Asahi. But for me, you know, that beer is consistently good, and it will always be the beer that I reach for if it's on at the bar.
Right. Well, I hope you enjoy your final Balter XPAs, whatever it ends up being. And yeah, best of luck back in New Zealand. You know, don't be a stranger.
Thank you. And yeah, same. If you're ever over my way, don't be a stranger.
Of course. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
Cheers. The Crafty Pint podcast is produced and edited by Matt Hoffman. You can get all your beer-related news and reviews on the Crafty Pint website, craftypint.com, and can stay up to date on future podcast episodes via our socials.
We wouldn't be able to produce the podcast or the website, events or festivals we run without the support of the beer industry, whether that's suppliers, bars, breweries or bottle shops. If you'd like to support the show or partner with the Crafty Pint in other ways, please reach out to Craig via the details in the show notes.
And if you're a beer lover who'd like to support what we do, you can join our exclusive club for beer lovers, the Crafty Cabal. Visit craftykabal.com for more.
And until next time, drink good beer.